And we should be fairly
Bisu
synced.
fighting! Yeah, oh, I'm so excited to see Bisu win, even just like replays of VODs.
Yes, I can watch these matches a million times.
Well, since nothing's really going on right now, I'm not really sure if any of you have watched the first-person VODs of these games, but what you'll note in these games is that Savior actually never sends a drone scout out early. In fact, he essentially, in his play, assumes that his opponent is going to fast expand, and plays accordingly by taking his natural and then his mineral natural extremely quickly. And it seems that the trigger for taking the double gas expansion in the later stages of the game was actually finding out for certain that Bisu was early expanding, but I think Savior just had an excellent read on the basic strategy of his opponent, even before the games began.
Yeah, and if you look at past games of Savior, when he played against Free, and also when he played against Null Ra on Longinus, they both did a double gate at their natural and tried to rush Savior, and Savior did 12 hatch, 11 pool, and successfully defended both of their rushes and went on to own them. So I don't think he's too concerned.
I didn't even see him get a sunken colony. He just held the rush really strongly, just with strong Zergling control, just letting his hatch take a few hits while he got enough momentum up with Zerglings. He opted to get a third hatchery more quickly in those games instead of build sunken. Okay, that's getting a little off topic.
Yeah.
But right now we're seeing
a little bit
be really standard by sending his drones out to try to stop this expansion. And we also saw this in his other games, that he sends 2 drones out, not necessarily to try to kill the probe, but so that he can take his second natural should he not be able to take his first natural.
Yeah, so Bisu's just going to try to delay it here, but Savior will go ahead and get it in pretty quickly.
I also feel like this is a really nice little advantage for Bisu, that he was just able to spot Savior immediately, like in the first position. I mean, that was like a huge help in the first 2 games, that Savior was in the first spot Bisu checked both times.
Oh, definitely, because otherwise I'm almost sure that Bisu would have had to have gone Forge first. I don't think he would have risked Nexus first without having scouted, so it's just a nice comfort for him to scout first.
Yeah. You have to be like the Korean commentators, and every time you say anything you go, nah. That's like pretty good.
Yeah, nah.
Nah. Yeah, so this is like totally standard by both players at this point. The fact that Savior is double expanding like this is an extremely common counter to the Protoss' early expand. This is actually applicable on almost any map where a Protoss player fast expands, is for the Zerg to double expand and then tech to layer as quickly as possible thereafter, either to get lurkers to defend any direct attack from ground, or to get mutalisks and sunken colonies so that you can put pressure on your opponent and defend your fairly spread out expansions early on. So I was completely expecting Savior to do one of those 2 at this point in the match.
Yeah, definitely. And for the Protoss players, you should really pay attention to what order Bisu ends up getting his tech. And I'll try to point out what he does. But you'll see he will get his Stargate with the first 150 gas that he gets. I know I'm getting a little ahead of the game, but just to say it right now, he is going to skip +1 weapons, skip Citadel first, skip anything like that, and the very first 150 gas he gets is going to go straight to a Stargate. And he's probably already decided to do that build at this point, and it was probably a pretty safe prediction before the game even started, since Savior is playing such a standard play so far.
Yeah. I think the Stargate also is kind of an interesting option that we haven't really seen exploited too much by a lot of players. A lot of players seem to blindly go straight for the Citadel after they early expand, because oftentimes when players go Starport first and opt to get the Corsair, they consider it to be primarily a scout than a harass, but Bisu really changes that by making a large amount of Corsairs, and you'll see his mid-game strategy unfold. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but right now let's focus on the fact that Savior took the double gas expansion almost instantly. Like, he got his lair, and that's morphing very quickly, but then he also got that hatchery very, very fast. And if you watch the first-person VOD, Savior barely has just enough money to continue constant drone and overlord production while taking this expansion. You'll even note that Savior opted to get only 2 Zerglings and even got them very late, so it's a very kind of powering-oriented build. And again, we see Savior also getting the Hydralisk Den for Lurkers, again very standard, but that still is a little bit unorthodox to take that, to take a third expansion that quickly in the early game. But then we'll also see that Savior has planned out how to deal with this really widespread out, overextended kind of strategy in the early game. You'll see him powering lots of drones, and then going for a heavy amount of tech units. The Lurkers are a really good option because they'll allow you to defend your expansions fairly easily from large numbers of Zealots, which again are very common early on for Protoss. But in addition, his transition to Mutalisks allows him to defend and put pressure on his opponent at the same time. So this was a really strong opening by Savior.
Yeah, and back to Bisu's build, he did get his second gas fairly early, and a lot of Protoss skip out on that so they can get their macro going with all the minerals, but he needs the gas. And after he had gotten that Stargate with the first 150 gas, he's going straight to DTs. He got Citadel with the next 100, and Templar Archives with the next 200, and you'll see he's getting his second gate in time so that as the Archives finishes, he can begin building 2 gates, or excuse me, 2 Dark Templar.
And that's really what I felt was the most interesting transition that Bisu pulled off, is that rather than getting Zealot legs right after he got the Starport, or Stargate, or whatever the fuck makes there for Protoss, he instead opted to get the Dark Templar, which is an absolutely brilliant counter by Bisu, because the only problem with doing this double expand strategy, or triple expand strategy by Savior, is the overextension factor. That really is a huge problem for Savior this game, but also something that a lot of Zergs do incorrectly against Protoss and Terrans alike, is that they expand a little too much. They get a little too greedy. Because in Starcraft, you don't have to win by a huge margin. You just have to win. And this kind of build that Savior's doing is very momentum-oriented. You have to deal with lots of harassment and pressure in the mid-game stages, and if you can survive that, it'll allow for a significant momentum swing in the end game and late mid-game stages. But again, this is so smart by Bisu to do this. As we can see, the Dark Templar is wandering right into his main because Savior had to cluster all his overlords in one spot to protect them from the Corsairs. And right now, this allows Bisu the opportunity to expand more while he's putting all this significant pressure on Zerg. I don't think Bisu would have opted to expand so quickly had he not seen Savior triple expand like that. He knows Savior needs
That's
to be,
right.
He knows Savior needs to be more concerned with defending against these Dark Templar raids than with actually making any sort of aggressive plays. So it's totally safe for Bisu to take this expansion before he's gotten too many gateways. And we'll even see that throughout the rest of the game. That Bisu opts to stick around 5-6 gateways, even after he's gotten his mineral natural, and opts to take his double gas expansion, which is really critical for the mid-game stages.
For sure. And also note that these DTs were pretty much a guaranteed thing for Bisu to do because he was scouting with his Corsairs, and because Savior has to defend in 3 different spots from these DTs, because Bisu can either go to the natural, to the mineral only, or to the double gas expand to do some damage. And there's just no way Savior could have protected all 3 of those from this Corsair DT attack.
What's also interesting to note is that if you watch Savior's first-person VOD, you'll really see that the way Savior is transitioning with this style, so in case any of you other Zerg players are wishing to mimic this kind of style, is that it's really smart that right after he gets the Lurker upgrade and kind of has Mutalisks and lots of drones everywhere, he opts to get Hydralisk speed and range really quickly, and having Hydralisk speed, range, and Lurkers are really, really nice because it's very mobile and it is very good at kind of fending off harass. And you'll also see Savior getting drop in these games as well. So right after he's able to stop this mid-game aggression, which Bisu's putting on very clearly in this game right now, after he's able to hold this off, Savior can still make some sort of counter-offensive with a drop. But now, again, we're seeing how aggressive Bisu is. by not only attacking the front, but having the Dark Templar go in the back. And that really is one of the most effective ways to counter a Zerg player at any level, is just to do a lot of things in different places, because that really breaks a Zerg's focus.
Yeah, the multitasking, even professional Zergs can't handle, as we see here. Savior still falls victim. Also note how Bisu is microing his Archon, making sure that it doesn't take any unnecessary damage so that it can fight these Mutalisks when the time comes.
And also, perhaps the most significant thing to note about what Bisu is doing is this really isn't a huge, giant attack, and it will never be a huge, giant attack, you know, for the rest of the mid-game. Bisu maintains a fairly low gateway count. This is essentially an extremely aggressive form of harassment. I mean, look, he's losing Zealots. There's no way he's going to be able to win the game immediately with these, but he's just trying to keep his opponent's drone count as low as possible, so Savior will be forced to kind of split his money, or excuse me, split his larva on drones and units.
Yeah, as we saw there, Bisu only has 6 gateways at the moment, and another Protoss could easily have 9 or 10 gateways at this point, but he wouldn't have any growth. But Bisu is able to constantly make probes, and if this game had lasted long enough for Bisu to finally let his macro show, he would have been able to pump from 10 to 15 gateways easily with these 4 expansions up.
Yeah, the real theme of these games, especially this first game and the third game, is Savior overextends himself too much. As we talked about before the matches, Savior's aggressive style of play generally forces his opponents to play a little bit more turtle-ish. Consequently, this build that Savior's doing is an excellent option. Most players against Savior, especially most Protosses, would try to do a little bit of harassment with Zealots, and then would try to take their mineral natural relatively safely. And then Savior's momentum would kick in the end game stages with the Hydra Lurk, or excuse me, in the late mid game stages with the Hydra Lurker drops, and then would allow him to tech to hive fairly easily with the 4 gases and his mineral natural. So, what the fuck was I talking about?
well, here we see again that, you know, Savior just can't defend this base over here.
Yeah,
you know, Bisu tried to attack over near the Nat in the mineral only, and there were lurkers set up there, but there's nothing stopping Bisu from coming over here and taking out this expansion.
Yeah. I mean, again, you'll
and Savior's going to go for this counter here, but it's really, I mean, it's not a good, I mean, it doesn't really have a chance, but there's nothing else he can really do at this point.
Yeah, and you'll note that Bisu Bisu probably could not have killed Savior's defense if it was well positioned, but because Savior had to spread out so thin, he just popped around back and forth, just trying to wear down his opponent, and then once Savior spots the fact that Bisu has a double gas, he just types out.
That's right.
So again, as Bisu really exploited the fact that Savior got a little too greedy in that game with taking that many expansions, it would have been the correct play for Savior to make, had he been experiencing this kind of aggressive play in a practice game, would be to opt to take just his natural and his mineral natural, and then to go ahead and do what he was doing before, get the Hydralisk speed, and then take the bottom right double gas a little bit later. He doesn't exactly need it that quickly, and plus he's probably not used to the fact that Bisu got that many Corsairs early game. It's kind of interesting to think of what Bisu could or would have done had Savior played a little bit more tightly. In fact, in the post-game interview, Bisu said that Savior played a style that he's fairly comfortable at playing against, and I'm certain that was the overextension factor. And I'm kind of curious, well, like, Noni, what are your thoughts on, if Zerg had not taken the double gas that early, what kind of transition do you think Bisu would have opted for?
I think he would have went for approximately the same kind of play, because it wouldn't have been entirely weak. I think the DTs would have been repelled, but I also think that Bisu could have taken his mineral only fairly quickly at the same time. So the harass wouldn't have been as good, but still the macro side of things, I think Bisu wouldn't have fallen that far behind, and it would have just turned into a longer game.
Yeah, I really think that's a real key discovery that Bisu really made in these games is that against Zerg players, you don't exactly have to do the big push that a lot of players have in mind. You don't exactly have to wait around to get up that standard Templar, Dragoon, Archon, Zealot army, and then once you have observers, you break out and walk over the Zerg in one big throw. Moreover, Bisu highlighted that you can't even do little tiny harass throughout the game. Bisu really does this all-out aggressive harass. He gets 3, 4 overlords, 3 or 4 corsairs if he sees his opponent is spread out enough, and really starts trying to get Dark Templar in and trying to get speed zealots past sunken colonies into the main, and really just tries to put a huge amount of pressure on his Zerg opponent in the mid game, which I personally, it is just hell to deal with if you're against a Protoss player who's really just throwing a lot at you in the mid game, because Protoss can freely take expansions then, and that's really annoying to deal with. Once you've stabilized, your Protoss opponent is equal to you in expansions and really seems impenetrable.
Yeah, and looking forward to the next game, what I think is interesting is that we're going to see Savior play very similarly to how he did in the first game. He seems kind of stubborn to say, you know, I'm gonna play this way, and your harass isn't gonna work this time. But as we find out, it continues to work. So I think it's pretty interesting that Savior sticks to that, and yet he still falls victim to it.
Yeah, very true. All right, so on to game 2.
All right. You got it queued up?
Yeah, did you start a new file?
Okay, yeah, hold on.